the greatest day of my life!
Ocean man, take me by the hand, lead me to the land.
What you just watched was the ending scene from the SpongeBob SquarePants movie, an animated film released in 2004 that, of course, adapts well-known cartoon SpongeBob SquarePants into a flick for the big screen. If you are a fan of SpongeBob, you've probably seen this movie and have heard the particular song that's being played at the end here. Ocean Man.
First of the land, ocean man, can you see through the wonder of amazement?
Ocean Man, to put it bluntly, is a pretty big meme.
This is the greatest day of my life!
Ocean Man, take
You can find all sorts of parodies, remakes, remixes, and references to it online. It even has over 100 million streams on Spotify. But what most people don't particularly think about is the band behind it, Ween. Shrouded in a mythology of scotch cans, drugs, and the all-seeing god Boognish, Ween are Aaron Freeman and Mickey Melchiondo, better known as Gene Ween and Dean Ween respectively. Their song Ocean Man originates from their 1997 release The Mollusk, but let's take a step back here and look at the history leading up to this album and why Ocean Man, nay Ween, an alternative rock prankster duo, are included next to SpongeBob of all things. Ween begins its life in 1984, where young Aaron and Mickey would team up together in high school and form this duo. For about 6 years, they've released their own cassettes and write songs meant to be as obnoxious as possible. In the Ween canon, they were brought together in 8th grade by the Boognish, a spirit of sorts that wished the boys to spread his word far and wide through their music. Once Ween began performing, they would eventually be heard opening for rock band Skunk, a show which had manager of Twin Tone Records Dave Ayers in the audience, someone who was aiming to sign a record deal with Skunk. However, he ended up liking Ween so much Ween were signed to the label, and their first release, God Ween Satan the Oneness, was released in 1990. God Ween Satan is described as a best of for Ween in between the years of 1984 and 1990.
Maybe he wants to play, but I can only say that I'll get you, I'll murder you, I'll crush you, I'll put you down, down the toilet where you
During this point in time, Ween were aiming for a sound that they dubbed as brown, a so bad it's good musical styling that kept them firmly away from any real commercial success. Their second album, The Pod, exemplifies this. Recorded over the course of 10 months on a Tascam 4-track tape recorder in their home at the time, Gene and Ween both came down with an awful case of mononucleosis, and it shows. This album is slow, bizarre, drug-addled, and muddy, and released on Shimmy Disc Records in 1991.
Into a place of mega region, a snake.
Ween actually recorded quite a bit of material all the time with their 4-track at home. They'd record for 1 or 2 hours a day, add this up for nearly 2 years, and you amass quite a lot of material. At some point, Dean had been in a local studio adding drums and guitar to some new tracks, and an A&R representative at Elektra Records, Steve Rabovsky, decided to pop into the same studio. For about 45 minutes, Steve stood over Mickey's shoulder, absolutely laughing his brains out. Eventually, word of this mysterious Ween group circled around the A&R circuit, and the following bidding war was won by Elektra. The contract stated Ween would earn a good couple $100,000 per record release, and it was quite fair. No representatives had to poke around what Ween were doing in the studio. In fact, the first album of Ween's released on Elektra Records would be the third in their Brown trilogy, Pure Guava, an album comprised of songs recorded after the Pod sessions on 4-track tape. Not even tape they spent money on, but demo tapes that were given to them by bands they had met on tour. They spent something like $42 on the album, and by contract were given $200,000 for it.
I saw the little birdie sing, he sang with glee.
Like the Pod, it still sat firmly in lo-fi aesthetic with drum machines and shoddily recorded and manipulated vocals, albeit with more range, but somehow it resonated with people more. The album sold decently well, and it even gave way to their most successful single, Push the Little Daisies, gaining exposure thanks to its critique on Beavis and Butthead.
These guys got no future.
With all this money that they'd earned, Ween decided to go back to recording on more than 4 tracks and rented out an office space to set up recording for their next album. These new songs would not only be better produced than the last 2 records, but it allowed Ween to play with more elements, bongos, live drums from their friend Claude Coleman, and different instrumentation and styles that weren't possible on just a 4-track. Ween would use this to their advantage with these sessions, which produced their 4th record, Chocolate and Cheese. Chocolate and Cheese is a record that begins a period where Ween phase out their experimental lo-fi label and prove they can write songs, not just about ticks or bees or pork roll, egg, and cheeses, but expand themselves across all genres like it's nothing. Take the first 3 tracks off this record, for example, and they're all entirely different. Take Me Away is a 60s Doors type rock number done with a faux live crowd and inflections worthy of a Vegas performer. Spinal Meningitis is an unhealthy slice of itchy, uncomfortable brownness joking about a child with needles in their spine asking if they're gonna die, and Freedom of 76 6 is a classic Philly soul cut with impressive falsetto, sweet saccharine major 7th chords, and an atmosphere worthy of a Boyz II Men tune. Chocolate and Cheese is filled with these juxtapositions. It's an album that can stand by itself and prove that Ween cannot be pigeonholed into a gimmick or stereotype. Ween were a band that should be taken seriously. They still had more room to expand upon their sound.
It's Dean and Gene Ween.
Ween.
Yeah. Ween kicks ass.
Yeah. This is kind of groovy.
Freedom. Yeah, this is kind of groovy. How do they do that? How do they sing all high and stuff?
I think if you snip your nads off.
In late 1995, Gene and Dean wanted to return to recording at home and decided to fulfill a dream of theirs, to record an album by the beach. From October to November of 1995, they rented a beach house in New Jersey on the Holgate Shore and began demoing and recording their next album there, spending every Sunday through Thursday there and listening to the cassette tapes on the way home. During these early sessions, the album took on a distinctly nautical theme. Besides recording, the only thing you could particularly do with these November days was to surfcast and walk on the beach. It wasn't purposeful, the songs just ended up that way. One key song to come from these sessions was The Mollusk, the song that ended up the title track of this new album. Diener puts it this way: I laid down some chords and took this little module that I'd plugged into a keyboard that made all those really trippy swirling sounds, which were the ones we used on The Mollusk. I came back from surfcasting and Aaron played the song with the vocals he had written. It was so fucking great. It was the best song we'd ever done. I couldn't believe that he had taken what I had done with the music.
The ocean sound, bring forth the mollusk cast unto me. Let's be forever, let forever be free.
These sessions ultimately bore fruit that Ween were in love with, but they had things to do. Ween left their New Jersey home to go down to Nashville for a little experiment. They had gathered 12 legendary country musicians at the legendary country recording studio Bradley's Barn to cut, you guessed it, a country record. When they finished recording this LP, they didn't return to their New Jersey home for a couple of weeks. Creative burnout working on 2 albums back to back is severe. But when they eventually returned in the dead of winter, disaster had struck. According to Diener, the steps were 5 inches thick with water. The whole house was covered in ice. After traversing the steps to get inside, the whole interior was underwater. I flagged down a cop who helped me turn off the water mains. The pipes had frozen and burst under the sinks. Our gear and anything that was on the floor was soaked and ruined. The tapes, thankfully, were on top of the kitchen table. I honestly started crying. The record was almost done. Ween took it around to various studios and added a couple more songs to round off the album, got it mixed by Andrew Weiss, mastered by Howie Weinberg, and boom, The Mollusk. They sent it to their label and waited. During 1995, all of the Elektra staff had changed, and the guy that had signed Ween was unfortunately fired. The new employees at Elektra's first introduction to Ween was through this country record known as 12 Golden Country Greats, and were clearly unsure about what to do with The Mollusk, so for 2 weeks, the band waited for any response at all. I finally called the A&R guy because the suspense was killing me. I said, "What do you think of the new record?" And he said, "What new record?" I yelled, "The new record! The Mollusk!" I heard him fumbling around on his desk and he said, "Oh, here it is." He hadn't even listened to it for 2 weeks. At that point, I knew the fucking record was doomed. Jesus Christ. They just gave us 2 huge advances and we delivered 2 albums. I don't know if they thought we were trying to put them on a second time, or someone mentions, "Those guys did a nautical record." I was so pissed. This was the best thing we've ever done and they didn't even care. Despite all of this, The Mollusk released on June 24th of 1997. One thing you'll immediately notice is how in tune the record art is with the music. Storm Thurgerson from Hypnosis designed it all. You may know their designs and album art from their work with Pink Floyd. Thurgerson did all of the designs for free upon hearing The Mollusk. He went down to the aquarium to take pictures of sea creatures, ones that looked bizarre, slightly off kilter, and the album cover, inner booklet, and other promotional material is an amalgamation of all these pictures, hand-drawn, painted, or just a snapshot. Besides the immediately recognizable art, we have the track list of 14 tunes. Compared to Chocolate and Cheese, this was really a step up for Ween musically. Even though Chocolate and Cheese had its fair share of variety and experimentation, Ween dialed it up to 11 with a maturity previously only seen in bits and pieces.
Hey little boy, what you got there? Did you
Of course, the penultimate track before the epic closer She Wanted to Leave is, you guessed it, Ocean Man, a song that just, quote, fell into place. The Mollusk was out, and at first it wasn't particularly loved by everybody. This was such a step up from any of their records that people were unsure whether it was worth listening to, worth taking seriously. But there was still a cult following online. a buzz about Ween, spreading demo tapes, sparking discussion, and over time, this following has grown into critical reappraisal for the mollusk. However, it certainly touched somebody upon release, that being Steven Hillenburg. He gave Ween a call and thanked them for making such an incredible record, stating that it inspired him deeply while he was developing his own little cartoon series. That series being SpongeBob SquarePants. And so we come full circle. The song off of the album that aided in the birth of SpongeBob is commonly associated with the movie considered its last great hurrah.
You know what they say, curiosity salted the snail. Mind your wandering eye, you little mollusk. Sweet dreams, Gary.